people, a lot of these people were still living during the time. So, to my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Queen Tiye, when Akhenaten passed, she was still alive. Okay, and Nefertiti was still alive, and certainly the boy king was still living. Okay, or at least a baby, right? Nefertiti's position became increasingly uncertain when her man died. Right, she's not from there. She got married to this man, but do she go back home? Right? Some scholars believe she assumed the throne under the name Neferu Aten, potentially ruling as a female pharaoh before vanishing from the historical record. So did she take on another name? Did she take on another title so she can continue his legacy? All right, or at least maintain what she has left. I don't know. Okay, because if she had been to King Tut's mom, her legacy would likely have continued through his reign, but instead, her connection to him is absent in official inscription. Once King Tut became King Tut, Nefertiti was no more. You don't see or hear nothing about her at all. It was all about him. Man. Brother Ferguson says Nefertiti for sure was not from the Caucasus Mountains. Yusuf says definitely. Miss Blue says it must cause some kind of heartache knowing they wanted sons, or they not just wanted but needed to continue this dynasty. Somebody to have a boy around here, right? Yeah. Mama Louise says I'm sure there was a strain between the couple for desire the birth of a male heir. Yeah. Mostly I agree with Mama Louise, but Queen couldn't say nothing because she was a foreigner. And like I said, even though she may have had nobility, but she was not in the inner circle like that. She was in a bad spot. She may have had some money, but she didn't have the influence like Queen Tiye had. Because remember, Queen Mother's still alive. Okay, she had the power, right? Yeah. And get this, so when King Tut rose into power, Nefertiti is no more. What happened to her? All right, let's go. So there was, you guys guessed it, you guys kind of picked it up. There was some issues. There was a rivalry between Queen Mother and daughter-in-law. Ooh, man, there was some issues between Queen Mother and daughter-in-law. Yeah. There's some evidence research suggests that a possible rivalry between Queen Tiye and Nefertiti, two powerful women in overlapping spheres of influence. So they bump heads a little bit. Queen Tiye, Queen Mother, as the kings of real mother and experienced matriarch, may have clashed ideologically or politically with Nefertiti, who championed radical religious reforms. Tiye, who's Akhenaten's mother, was a powerful matriarch with considerable influence. Remember, we said this before in the top 5 queens. She had diplomatic powers. People from out of town, from other countries, was writing to her, asking for her advice. Okay, Queen Mother still has some influence, and some sources imply she maintained authority during her son's reign. She still had it. So there was some clash between them, between mother and daughter-in-law. There was some issues. He said, "Look, I'm sure I probably got petty too. My son don't like the macaroni and cheese like that. You better cook it like this." Man, I'm sure it got like that. I'm sure it got like that. You know. So Ms. Blue said, also, we know they're good at making people disappear once Tut took the throne. Yeah, and then by the time King Tut became in his teen years, Queen Tiye I'm sure she was already gone. So there was really nobody around him. to really buffer this, to really give him some guidance on this. All right, yeah. So the dynamics between Queen Mother and the great royal wife may have included political maneuvering, especially in the court already divided by religious and ideological conflicts. This tension could have further complicated the maternal narrative surrounding King Tut. Yeah, there was some issues. Because they got to address that, right? So think about it. There was no male heir that would continue her family's name. Think about Queen Tiye. Okay, this is her sitting next to her husband right here. Amenhotep III. Okay, the great Amenhotep III. All right, knowing what this legacy represents, right? At this point, her son is gone, right? There's no male heir. Well, her son is not gone yet, but up until this point, all they had was daughters. All they had was girls, right? So there's no male heir that will continue her family's name, no male heir that will continue her husband's and her son's legacy. And Nefertiti ain't royalty. Think about this. Think about it as parents. Okay, I know there's some parents that are watching live, and there's some parents that are listening on the replay. Think about this. Think about it. This foreign girl. We got to make them real. We got to make them people. This girl got my son's nose wide open. Okay, think about her position. This boy started liking this girl over here. He not only left the house, he changed gods. Think about that. Think about how would you feel? Okay, now we're not gonna say we're gonna leave them alone and let them go with each other, all the things. We know how we get with our children, right? And we have a feeling that this person isn't right for our child. We would try to intervene. We would try to sway a little bit. So think about Queen Mother, Queen Tiye, okay? Her son is heavily influenced by this woman who's not really from here, and she messing his head all the way up. Yeah. And they still don't have a male heir yet. Yeah. And I still believe that Akhenaten was mentally out of balance. Okay. He may have been born into this situation, but there was something going on in his mind that caused him to be out of balance like that. Because most of the rulers before him weren't like that. Okay. Everybody was trained to be king. Everybody was trained to be Isabiti. Everybody knew the meta nature. Everybody went to the car, did the Hebsed festivals, all the things. But Akhenaten, he was different. Okay. I think he was out of balance. What do y'all think? Let me see. The fam is talking. Yeah. This is so real. Yeah, it is. We forget that these people were people, right? And as parents, if we feel that our children are being influenced the wrong way or being swayed by another crowd, we would try to reel them back in. And I really believe that Queen Tiye was trying to reel her son back in. Okay, that's the reason why we got some other ladies in the mix in this story. Yeah, because she wrote, because when that boy went to Amana, got another house out there, Queen Mother started writing letters. Said, boy, you need to come back home. She's not good for you. She may be pretty, she may be nice, but something's not right about her. Okay. And her cousins, they kind of doing weird stuff over there. Things like that. Right? So, like I said before, all right, I said this before, Queen Nefertiti is not King Tut's mother. Okay? Queen Nefertiti is not King Tut's mother. Now, so you might have you say she might have vanished from the records. What happened to her? What happened to Nefertiti? Now, if you're enjoying the content, like and subscribe, because I'm gonna try to lightly answer this question. What happened to her? Since she's not the mother, though, what happened to Nefertiti? Okay, like and subscribe. Those who are here. Okay, If you're enjoying this content, hit the like button and subscribe. Let's go. Now, what happened? Here's a couple of theories. What happened to Nefertiti? Okay, here's one. She died before Akhenaten. Okay, that's a theory. Nefertiti became Pharaoh, Neferu Aten. Okay, she changed the name, right? Nefertiti, the third one became Smenkhare. Okay, or she was erased by the restoration. By the time the Amun priesthood got back into power, they started racing folk out. Okay, yeah. So, and this the simplest theory. Okay, she died before Akhenaten, which is kind of faulty. I don't think that really happened. Is perhaps that she simply died a natural death. Someone before or shortly after. She probably died right before or after. This is what some people say. Her name disappeared. Get this, her name disappears in the official record about year 12 of Akhenaten's reign. So according to some scholars, they believe that she either died before Akhenaten, right before he died, or a little bit after, because she's not mentioned. But the question, was it an illness? Was it political fall from grace? We're not sure. But there's an issue. Okay, here's the issue. Nefertiti wasn't just the queen, she was his co-regent, right? His equal, the royal wife, but also she was the mistress and lady of the two lands, right? And so she appeared in reliefs showing that she was smiting enemies and making offers to the Aten, wearing crowns traditionally reserved for Pharaoh. Okay, was somebody that powerful just disappeared? Okay, what do y'all think? Another one, Nefertiti became the Pharaoh Neferu Aten. Now, Neferu Aten means the beauties of Aten, beauty or beautiful of the Aten, right? So around the time the name Nefertiti disappears from inscriptions, a pharaoh with the name Neferu Aten appears. So as the name and time Nefertiti goes out, Neferu Aten comes in. This ruler is sometimes addressed with feminine pronouns. So she probably took on that name. Okay, so she can continue his ideas, so she can continue Akhenaten's views, right? So Egyptologists like Nicholas Reeves and Aidan Dodson argue that Nefertiti, she didn't disappear, she just transformed. Okay, she shed her queenly robes and took on the role of a king. So if it's true, this would make her a female pharaoh also, alongside Sobek Neferu and Hatshepsut, right? That's another one. Another one is this. But the thing is, why would she change her name though? I'm just thinking about that. Why would she change her name? Okay, I don't know. But Nefertiti, third theory is Nefertiti became Smenkhare. Okay, some believe that Smenkhare was a male pharaoh who briefly ruled after Akhenaten, right, like a couple years before King Tut came on the scene. It might not have been a man at all. It may have been Nefertiti herself, right? But remember, a lot of people didn't like the idea of the Aten, so she went with the old name Smenkhare or Smenkhara, right? Yeah. Mama Louise said, yeah, clever transformation for sure. She had to do a little political sleight of hand, right? Yeah. So think about it. So here's some evidence. So it's a little bit sparse, but it's kind of rare. But the name Smenkhare and Neferu Aten often appears interwoven, like they was connected. Some tomb inscriptions originally naming Smenkhare will later be altered to Neferu Aten, or vice versa, right? Were these two people, or were they the same person with two different titles? Okay, was Nefertiti changing the name to master politics? Because remember, her husband believed in the Aten, but the Amun priesthood and the old school folk are still in Kemet, like the priest of Osiris, the priest of Ra, and all them. They still have political influence. They still have power in Egypt, right? So she may have had to change this ideology. She had to embrace this radical view, but in order to do that, she had to do away with her own identity. Okay. And the last one, she was erased by the restoration. Okay, regardless of what identity she assumed, the truth is clear that the Amana period was over. Okay, the idea of the seat of power away from Thebes or Waset is over. We're going back to Waset. We're going back to Memphis. We're not going to be hanging out in this desert called Amana. We're going back to the house. So there was a purge. There was a purge. Okay, so Akhenaten's memory was done. Okay, his monuments torn down and destroyed, names chiseled out, temples dismantled, and anyone associated with him, including Nefertiti, was buried by silence. And in Kemetic culture, even in African culture, for your name to be erased, your memory is gone. That is putting you in a place of oblivion, right? So the young King Tut, Akhenaten's likely son, became the figurehead of the return of the old style or the old religion. Okay, his name used to be Tutankhaten, now it's Tutankhamun, right? So the return of Amun worship. His advisors, perhaps like General Horemheb, a military general, we're going to talk about him in a second too. General Horemheb sought to erase the spiritual revolution and all these changes and that Nefertiti and her husband put in place to go back to the old ways, right? This was probably her fate, okay? Eradication, okay? Excommunicado, just erased from memory. Because even to this point, there's some speculation as to where she's buried, but her body is not found either. Yeah, we found everybody else, but not her. All right. Now think about this. So, but there's some spiritual insight though. There's some spiritual insight about this. Okay, speculative spiritual insight. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Speculative spiritual insight that within the Kemetic spiritual thought, names are not just labels. Okay, it's not something that you put on a person. Names meant power. Okay, names represented power, and so identity transcends flesh or that person's body, right? If Nefertiti's name was spoken, she lives, right? So if her image endures, her ka is still charged, her ka still remains. So, and of course, thousands of years later, her face and her mysterious ways, her life, her resolute draws more eyes than many of the kings, right? Her name is still spoken in documentaries, museums, podcasts, even this one, right? So that is a kind of resurrection. Okay. But so by your name being called in African tradition, you are remembered somewhere, right? So what happened to Nefertiti after Akhenaten's death? Perhaps she became pharaoh, or perhaps she hid behind the mask of Semenkhare, or she was silenced by history. Okay. Or like the sacred cycle of the sun, she simply transcended and rose again in another form, right? In the new world, right? So whatever it is, Nefertiti remains eternal, right? Now, but if you want me to go to more detail about Queen Nefertiti, just the queen by herself, just type in comment Nefertiti, and we'll try to get into that. Okay, so yeah, because we gotta find out who's King Tut's mama is for real. All right, we can't hang out with Queen Nefertiti that much. But if you would like for me to go into more detail about Queen Nefertiti, let me know. Okay, now here it is. Here's another one, Kiya. So we have Queen Nefertiti, right? They had all girls. Kiya, the vanishing consort. Here it is. Here's another theory. Another leading theory. Get this, y'all. That is that King Tut's mother, King Tutankhamun's mother, was Kiya, a lesser-known wife of Akhenaten. She didn't have a lot of political roles, right? Kiya is referenced in several inscriptions and is believed to have held an important position in Akhenaten's court. Some scholars propose that she was a Mitanni princess from Syria sent to Egypt as part of a diplomatic marriage and not Nefertiti. So some people believe that Kiya was from Syria and not Nefertiti. Others believe she was a native Egyptian noblewoman who gained favor with Akhenaten. Okay, so we have Kiya. All right, so we have Kiya. Now, the argument, though, for Kiya as Tutankhamun's mother is based on various pieces of evidence. Her disappearance from records around the time of King Tut's birth suggests a possible connection. Okay, she disappeared about the time that King Tut was born. She disappeared. Her name, her likeness disappeared from records around the time King Tut was born. Okay. Additionally, her name and images were erased from certain monuments, possibly indicating an attempt to remove her from historical record. These folk did some shifty stuff, some shady stuff. Once they were done with you in Kemet, they were done with you forever. So yeah. So now this pattern of erasure is consistent with the latter suppression of Akhenaten's rule and religious changes, meaning that any connection to him, any connection to Akhenaten was no good. So him or his consorts and anybody else around him was intentionally obscured. So she only had one job. Okay, she only had one job, and that was to give birth to a king, to a prince. Right? She only had one job. Right? So, however, get this, y'all. There's no definitive evidence that links Kiya directly to King Tut, though. She was, for sure, the records say Kiya was married to Akhenaten, okay, as a second wife or whatever, but it doesn't say that she was directly linked to King Tut. So while some speculate, some believe that her sudden disappearance could have be explained by her dying at childbirth, there's no evidence of that, though. There's no evidence. Unlike other royal women, her tomb has not been definitively identified, leaving gaps in historical narrative. So there's no evidence, okay, fam? There's no evidence to link Nefertiti as the mother of King Tut or Kiya as the mother of King Tut. Now, we know both of them were married to Akhenaten. We know that, all right? We know that for sure, okay? So, but them being the mother of King Tut, yeah. Mama Lee says, Queen Nefertiti, yes. She's saying that we need to discuss more of Queen Nefertiti by herself. Yeah, I think she may have to have a solo. We may have to have a solo episode for her. And she says, see, this is where the family secret stuff is coming. This is where the family secret stuff is coming from. Yeah. Yeah, they did have some secret stuff. Okay. And so and I know dealing with that, what they was trying to put up a front that Akhenaten was this powerful and great king, which I'm sure he was, but as frail and fragile as the latter end of the 18th dynasty, it showed up. Those gaps and issues start showing up. Yeah. Now, so here it is. So we talked about Akhenaten, okay, and Nefertiti, a strategic royal union. Kiya, the vanishing consort. Now, got a few more things to deal with, though. Political intrigue in the Amarna court and the younger lady. Yeah, we're going to deal with that, okay? And just for y'all, because y'all asked for it, Kemetic science, esoteric meaning of the Jed. Yeah, y'all wanted a little bit more of the Kemetic science and symbolism. I got something for you. Now, the political struggles in the royal court. The question still remains, who was the real mother King Tut? We still on that. All right. But wait a minute. We're going to get into the political struggle. All right, let's go. Now, the royal court of Akhenaten was filled with political struggles. Okay. Particularly due to his radical religious reforms. That was a no-no. Okay. Because believe it or not, they had the belief of the hidden one, of the unmoved mover. So why would you reinvent something that was already established? So his introduction to monotheism centered around the worship of the Aten disrupted traditional polytheistic beliefs upheld by the powerful priesthood of Amun. Now, a lot of people would call them polytheistic, not necessarily so. Most of the Neteru or the ancestors were different, what's the word? Different ideas or different concepts or representations of the same thing. Okay. That's basically like African thought. It's like there were all these different ideas. All these were a representation of that one hidden one, right? This led to the tensions between the pharaoh's supporters and the traditional religious elite who saw their influence diminish, because when they make the temples, when they do all these things, it costs money, and they was losing money, right? So here we go. During, some say, now before I move on to some of the reasons, some of the struggles, get this. Some would say, I'll get to that in a second. Hold on, let's move on. All right, the Adonist faction, okay, led by Akhenaten, is supported and was supported by Nefertiti. This group promoted the sole worship of the Aten. They sought to eliminate the traditional power of a moon priesthood and restructure Egyptian religious practices. The Amun priesthood and traditionalists. So here's the faction: the Adonist faction, the Amun priesthood, the royal family. So we have one religion, Aten versus Amun, which I may discuss. Aten versus Amun, I may discuss that. And then the third, the royal family, right? So we have the Adonist faction, the Amun priesthood, right? So these individuals, the Amun priesthood, including many officials and military leaders, resisted Akhenaten's reforms and likely worked against him behind the scenes. Their influence was largely diminished during Akhenaten's reign, but reemerged after his death. They just waited. They just hung out in the back. They was chilling. They waited and said, okay, you talking, but when you leave, we're going to be talking again. So we have the Adonist faction, sponsored by Akhenaten, the Amun priesthood, basically the tradition and the old guard, and the royal family and court officials. Figures like Nefertiti's possible father and Horemheb, the military general, they played crucial roles in navigating the political chaos. Who was a noble, he would later become pharaoh after King Tut's passed. Okay, once King Tut somehow transitions, we don't know if it was him being sick or him being unalived by somebody. Okay. Yeah. yeah, that a lot of, he just didn't just pass away in his sleep. Okay. Yeah, King Tut didn't, something happened to him also. Okay. So so I would later become pharaoh after King Tut, while Horemheb ultimately restored the traditional religious practices and erased much of Akhenaten's legacy. And get this though, I found out, this is, by the way, this is Amenemhat III's pyramid capstone, right? This is Sebek-Neferu, Queen Sebek-Neferu's father capstone from the 12th dynasty. I heard that Akhenaten's team, his people, took that down, and they found a pyramid capstone on the ground somewhere. Yeah, for the old school people, they was like, oh no, you're not doing that. By you defacing some of the ancestors' work, that was a problem. That was a problem. Yeah. Yeah, that was an issue. So he like people say, Akhenaten, you're doing too much. You're doing too much, bro. Right? Now, Horemheb had he had considerable military power and political clout. He served as the commander-in-chief of the army. So he was the strong arm of Egypt. Okay. While Akhenaten, he was being all philosophical and religious, Horemheb had a military. His strategic influence and support from the traditionalist faction allowed him to eventually ascend. Eventually, he was going to rise to the throne. Okay, after King Ai's brief reign, his military backing and ideological opposition to Adonism enabled him to tilt the balance of power within the court and paved the way for Egypt's return to orthodoxy. Now I gotta think. I'm thinking about this. At first, I thought, okay, Horemheb, like, bro, you was Amenhotep's ace. You was his guy. But I really think ideologically they weren't the same. They weren't on the same page. I think Horemheb was more. He was a unifier than a usurper. What do you think? Do you guys think he was trying to unify Egypt, or he was just there as a usurper? He wanted to usurp authority. Okay, I think that he did not really mesh well with Akhenaten's view, and he wanted to keep the tradition. And he wanted to maintain that dynastic era, the best way he know how. All right, what do y'all think? Like and comment below. Now, so political struggles. The royal court itself was a complex institution centered at Akhenaten, or modern day Amana, or Akhenaten, where Akhenaten relocated the capital to focus on Aten worship. The court included a hierarchy of officials, scribes, nobles, and military leaders, and religious functionaries, many of whom had conflicting loyalty. Royal women such as Queen Tiye and Nefertiti also had influential positions and managed their own estates and entourages, further adding to the political issue, the political struggle. Everybody had their own team. Everybody had their own camp. Okay? Remember, Queen Nefertiti, if she was a foreigner, she didn't come in there by herself. Right? So foreign convoys, diplomatic marriages added an international dimension to court politics, making it a center of both religious and experimentation and volatile power struggles. Now, so there was some political